Welcome back to this week's episode of The Big Sky Now. First up, we're going to get to an interview with the Daily Interlake's own Fritz Neighbor, one of the best around when it comes to go-to guys for Griz knowledge, Griz football, Big Sky football history in general. So we're going to have a good talk with Fritz coming up first, and then we'll chat with Brandon Hansen, based out of Eastern Washington, part of the Hagadone Sports Network. He's going to be coming in to talk a little Eastern Washington Eagles football and Big Sky as a whole. We're going to talk some Idaho Vandals, talk about Montana State, Sac State, UC Davis. We're going to sprinkle it all in there. It's going to be a fun show. Idaho State and Cal Poly get some mentions as well, so you don't want to miss this one, Big Sky football fans. More to come soon from yours truly, Josh Dugan. All right, joining me is Fritz Neighbor of the Daily Interlake. Going to talk a little Griz football, a little Big Sky football in general right now. Maybe some Montana State even. Maybe some Idaho Vandals. We'll see where it all goes. So, Fritz, thanks as always for taking the time. It's football season once again. Pretty crazy that it's already going on to week 2. Anything you want to get it started out with? If not, I just got a couple questions for you, and we could kind of go from there.
Well, I think we both know I went to Missoula Saturday morning and watched them play a pretty good squad, from the Patriot League. But, the offense wasn't real polished, with the exception of the first drive.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit of a struggle here and there. It got better in the second half. And, a W's a W. They've had plenty of tight wins against lower competition and in the midst of great years. So it's on to the next week for the Griz.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of what I was going to ask. I was going to say, new offensive coordinator, 2 quarterbacks. That's a feeling out kind of a game. You're just looking to get a dub and grow from it, and then you can kind of see what you have. I even mentioned kind of before, they could have probably ran out the clock even sooner. It was 21-6. They kept slinging it. You're trying to figure out what you got in this year's squad. And Butler, I think, was underrated with their QB, Bushka, I believe. That's just a football name, and he was a football guy. Kid was a playmaker, undersized, but one of those dudes that you can't count out, and it showed. So that's a good way to start it out for sure. Fritz was in attendance at the game at Washington Grizzlies Stadium. I do want to ask just kind of your initial thoughts, taking it all in person on this year's Griz team. Like you said, it's on to the next week, but just what you saw early on and your initial reaction.
Well, I didn't see a whole lot different from last year. I know there's a new coordinator. Brent Pease has been the coordinator before, during a more explosive time offensively in his history. So we'll see what happens as the weeks roll on. I thought the first quarterback, Vidlac, looked really good at times. Threw a bad interception in the third quarter, and then as the timing would have it, the other quarterback came in, McDowell, and 6'4", didn't seem like he should be able to run that upright and that strong, but he did. Really made a difference. Got a couple scoring drives put together for him. But I thought it was interesting that the Butler coach afterwards, having studied last year's tape to prepare for this year, said not a lot different. Not a lot different on defense. He couldn't really speak to the offense. I'll try to speak to it a little bit. I didn't see a whole lot different. It's pretty limited. That you can maybe chalk that up to the first week and playing 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I think they both ran kind of the same formations. They just do different things.
Yeah. And I did want to ask you about the 2 QB approach. I know historically it hasn't worked the best, but you see more and more in college football. There's so much talent at quarterback. It's starting to work a lot more. Sac State last year had 2 guys they rolled out. Of course, the Bobcats have mastered it with Chambers and Malott. Do you see the Griz down the stretch, or do you think Coach Houck, knowing how he is, they will roll the 2 QB system as long as it's working, or do you think eventually they'll kind of pick their guy?
I think eventually they'll pick a guy, but right now, they get Utah Tech this week. That's who MSU just boat raced on Saturday, 63-20. So they'll play both quarterbacks down there. I think Bobby Houck would eventually like to have a guy, but there's been years in the past, in 2009, which was a very good season for the Griz, comes to mind when they had Justin Roper and Andrew Sell fighting for reps after Cole Berquist graduated in 2008. So, we've seen this before. I think both quarterbacks will play a lot well into the season. And, I think one will probably step forward at the end or toward the end, maybe toward the middle.
Yeah.
For now, I think 2 is going to work just fine.
And I was going to say they complement each other very well. Vidlac, traditional pocket passer. McDowell, we didn't see him throw it a lot, but he is a weapon with his legs. So if you look at that, not to compare him too much to the Bobcats, they found a formula where you can still work in that second quarterback, whoever it may be, and let them be effective where they're at their best. Sean Chambers is an absolute red zone scoring machine. You got to think
and a blocker.
I saw that. Yeah, Sean Chambers laying the hat downfield, looking like a tight end. I know that was impressive. That was one of my favorite clips coming out of the Big Sky last weekend. Definitely look that up. Sean Chambers laying some blocks. But yeah, no, they have the formula down, and I got to wonder if the Griz kind of, like you said, they'll use both guys. Hopefully one steps up as that go-to, but they're so talented. From week one, there's a lot of moving parts, but they could put them in a role to succeed. Any other Griz stuff you want to mention? Of course, the defense, a lot of new faces, but like you said, the system remains the same. And this might be a hot take, give it some time. I almost feel like the defense, so many returning guys, could eventually be better than last year's defense just because another year of build-in. You see Braxton Hill, Jana Carroll, these guys, there's a lot of faces back who were good last year. Maybe they weren't All-Americans, but you have enough of those guys that can collectively as a group be special. So just your thoughts on the potential of this year's defense.
No, I agree. I mean, we brought Ryder Meyer. Ryder Meyer did not start. The kid from Fairfield who's all of 5'10", and led the team in tackles. And the one thing he said afterwards, because he went to the post-game presser, was the safety room's been loaded since he got there, and it's true. They graduated Robbie Hauk, of course, my man, with Garrett Graves from Eureka and Meyer and Fouch, that hit that he put on. A good form tackle, I might add, wasn't dirty. Yeah, they're loaded on the back end. Gradney made that great pick. So they're good at corner. They're really good at linebacker. And I think D-line got plenty of pressure. He's just, Bushka was a tough guy to get down.
Yeah, he's a squirmy dude. I feel like every time you got around him, he'd step up in the pocket, roll out to his right. No, he's kind of a fun QB to watch for week one.
Or jump backwards.
Yeah.
And throw and put it right on the money.
Yeah, one of those guys.
He was tough.
Yeah, just a playmaker. But no, I saw so much potential, and the returning players where you go might not be the O'Connell, the Ford, the Hauk, the big-time All-American type of players, but you get 11 dudes who could step up at the same time. It goes a long way. So, yeah, a lot of potential for this year's Griz defense. Any other Griz stuff you want to get to? If not, I had a couple other Big Sky questions to get to, but, yeah, feel free to throw it out there if so.
No, we can move on. I just thought to look at tomorrow's notebook, special teams once again. I mean, that offense was kind of struggling in the first half, and they faked a punt. And that seemed to kind of like get the wheels rolling a little bit again.
Yep. Get the blood pumping.
And they made 3 or 4 really good special teams plays, if not more, if you count some really solid punting from the third punter in 3 years.
Yeah, and Bergen right off the bat had a solid kick return. He's one of the, right off the bat, you realize, God, this guy's special anytime he touches the ball.
So did Graves,
Yeah, and Graves had a big one too. Yeah, their special team last year had a lot of key moments, and you expect that from Coach Hauk, so I'm sure he was pleased with that week one. He probably wouldn't admit it in the media, but I'm sure he was happy. But as far as other Big Sky, we'll mention Montana State, of course, big-time matchup on the horizon with number 1 ranked South Dakota State. The Jackrabbits could be the biggest non-conference game of the FCS season. I just get your thoughts on that. The Jackrabbits return a ton of talent, so do the Bobcats. So how do you see that one going? And just as I don't want to say a fan of the Big Sky, but that's just one as a football fan. You don't want to miss that game. That'll be a good one.
Oh, I'm a fan of the Big Sky.
Yeah, exactly. We're fans of the Big Sky. Exactly.
I'm a fan of the Pac-12 too. I don't know what happened there.
How long? Much longer, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great matchup. I'm really interested to see how it goes. Brent Vegan again today said the loss last December in the semis left a mark in the Cats, and basically that's been their rallying cry ever since in the weight room and spring drills and fall camp. So now they get another shot at them in Brookings. It's going to be a bigger crowd than you get during the playoffs. Be a sold-out house. Everybody's back for SDSU except for Coach Stig. He's about the only guy.
Oh, that's fair point.
So they got a new head coach, but he was on staff. It's going to be a lot of the same stuff. They didn't have their stud middle linebacker Adam Bach last week. Didn't matter. I don't know what his status is this week yet, but those two guys on the left side of the O-line are back, All-Americans. The quarterback is a great player, Mike Gronowski. He's back.
And Davis, the running back, I know he's a force as well.
Isaiah Davis is back.
They are loaded.
And they have another running back besides him. So it's gonna be a tall mountain. But a year ago, I thought when the Cats put 3 guys in the NFL, I thought there's no way they'd be as good, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. They're good. They have staying power. They're going to be good every year.
Yeah, and I do wonder, too, I mentioned a little on the sports now, just previewing that game just a little. Those playing conditions were terrible last year. I don't know if you remember. It looked like a hockey rink almost. Tommy Malott was slipping and sliding. So I do wonder a little better playing conditions. As much as that helps throwing the football, it gets to the point their running game was even affected. It was so bad. So like you said, it'll be more of a packed house, never an easy place to play, but at least that's a silver lining where you're not going to be slipping and sliding all over the field. And Tommy Malott, I think he might have even got injured slipping and sliding. So it was kind of a wild game, terrible field conditions. So that'll help Montana State. And I was going to ask you, just pretty much beat me to the punch, do you see them maintaining a similar level of play? And I know they're one of the top dogs in the conference. Does any other teams jump out as, wow, that team's special? I know Sac State's back again, same situation as South Dakota State, new head coach, but was on the staff, a lot of returning talent on that team as well.
Yeah, Sac State, it might be a little tougher. I know Andy Thompson's a heck of a coach, really smart guy, former Griz linebacker, and just an excellent dude. But they lost quite a bit.
Yeah, they were loaded last year.
The team I think you need to watch out for, and the Griz go there, is Idaho. I thought they were the better team when they played the Griz last year. They just looked better. And Hayden Haddon's I think he's probably the player of the year in the conference. He was a preseason pick. He's not going anywhere. He's really good. Their quarterback is back, Jelani McCoy. That's the team. Besides the Cats and Griz, I think will be at the top of the heap. But Sac State, they come up and face the Griz, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it is the Vandals. Another one, you almost beat me to the punch. I'm really high on Idaho right now. Their offense, like you said, McCoy's back. Hayden Haddon's back. They had that Jermaine Jackson, another 1,000-yard receiver. And then Anthony Woods in week one, the running back, he was good last year. I think he was a true freshman, maybe a redshirt freshman. He had a huge game. So you start doing the math, you're like, they might be the most complete offense where the Cats can run the heck out of the ball, but McCoy's definitely a great passer. And if they can mix in the running game, all of a sudden the Vandals, we'll see where they are when that time comes, but they play the Bobcats at home. I have it here. They play Sac State at home the 23rd. They host the Griz October 14th, and they host the Bobcats. So those three games, you got Sac State, the Griz, and the Bobcats all head in to Vandals territory. We're going to learn a lot about them during that stretch, but those are some tough games. If you can win all three of those, obviously you're a special team, but even to go 2-1 would be impressive right there. So,
but to have them all at home, and
yeah.
I don't know, it's just great to have them back in the conference. I don't think anybody around Idaho was real high on coming back to the Big Sky after being in the Bowl subdivision. And man, it's good to have them back. When I was a undergrad, which was a long time ago, it was Idaho and Nevada and Boise State all in the league.
Yeah.
And it took forever for the Griz to get to that level. And it's about the time all those teams left. But, I mean, they got them before they left, and then they left. So it's good to have Idaho back, have the Brownstein to play for again.
Yep.
And, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I might even get to go to Moscow. We'll see.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one for you for sure. I know it feels like they got something special brewing down there, definitely, with this year's squad following up last season. I believe their coach is in his second season with the program. I think Coach Eck, I believe. So
a South Dakota State disciple.
Okay, he is. I didn't know that. So, yeah, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, their coaches start wandering around having success. Brent Vegan, I know, was a North Dakota State guy for a while there, and Wyoming and all that good stuff. Right. So, it's going to be fun. I think the Vandals, I agree. That's why I wanted to ask. They seem like they have something brewing right now. Like you said, Hayden Haddon's a special talent where I've even seen his name dropped a little bit in NFL circles in the sense he could be a guy who catches on eventually, just so talented. So, excited to watch Idaho this year. They're going to play Montana State and the Griz, so we'll learn a lot about them and that Sac State game. As far as last thing I wanted to ask you, and I always say anything else you want to bring up or throw out there, go for it, but do you see any dark horse teams jumping out kind of like Idaho last year a little in the Big Sky where I feel like this year, from what I saw after 1 week, I'm thinking there's going to be less cakewalks where maybe Cal Poly, Idaho State were not very good this year. They'll at least be competitive this year. Your thoughts on those teams, or can anybody jump out?
Well, a team that should jump out and a lot of people thought they should have made the playoffs last year. Davis.
Yeah.
UC Davis. They've been pretty consistent under Hawkins, and they're not going anywhere. They certainly could have made a case for being snubbed a year ago. So that's one team to watch for.
Definitely.
The league is deep. There's a little bit of separation of power like we saw back in the early 2000s where, they'd send 2 or 3 teams to the playoffs is all, but it was only an 8-team league. Now it's 11. You got to look at 4 or 5 getting in. I think I think Davis is number 4 or Sacramento State's number 4.
Yeah, Sac State, they got their QB returning. Like you said, their coach has them rolling. And in week 1, I know they were replacing a star running back, and then they had 2 guys in week 1 put up big numbers on the ground. So all of a sudden, you look at that team, they're definitely one that can make that leap this year and should be a playoff contender. And I know there's a legitimate talk. Could the Big Sky have 5, 6 teams in the playoffs? I think last year they had 5 make it. And you could have, like you said, it was almost a snub. You could have had 6. So it's going to be a fun season. Deep rosters, a lot of FBS talent transferring, a lot of 3-star recruits and guys who have pretty high profiles coming in. I know Sam Heward's a guy from Cal Poly. He was a 5-star recruit, NFL pedigree. So Cal Poly's not expected to do much. It's like if you start adding it up, Idaho State played San Diego State, tough to Aztecs week 1. The bad teams are decent at least, and it's just going to be a crapshoot a little bit. It's going to be a fun season, and that's all good for us to make it interesting, definitely. But no, great stuff as always, Fritz. Anything else you want to throw out there? If not, always appreciate it.
Oh, that's good.
No, yeah, thank you, and we'll keep it rolling on the Big Sky Now. Here we are. Joining me on the Big Sky Now is Brandon Hansen, based out of Eastern Washington. I believe we're going to talk a little Eastern Washington, Big Sky, all that fun stuff today. Brandon did have some takeaways to get to. If you want to kind of lead with that, Brandon, and we can kind of dive into some of the questions I had, or however you want to get the ball rolling, feel free.
Okay, perfect. Well, I do have to say all these takeaways happened while I was golfing last weekend. So that was kind of nice to have college football get started. And then meanwhile, I'm just out actually in Pullman on their Pac-12 championship golf course. That was pretty fun. But in the meantime, Big Sky conference play gets started. And I have to say, really through and through a EW fan, went to school at EW. So seeing all these scores, seeing what happened, does not make me feel very excited about the season, because this conference is loaded. And I think that's the number one takeaway is, holy cow, up and down. This is one extremely tough league. You look at the top 10 rankings, or actually, I think the Big Sky Conference, Facebook and Twitter did this. They post the rankings of all the Big Sky teams, and it just looks like the top 10 rankings. It just looks like all the Big Sky schools are in the top 10, top 15, and that is what has me going. If you're not an elite FCS team, you're not going to do well. Eastern's a young team, so they have to learn on the fly, and doing it in the Big Sky Conference is not an easy lesson. We're not the history course that the football coach teaches, and it's easy to get A's. This is like a this is like trig or geometry. Everybody just trying to learn on the fly here. I mean, if you look at it, Sac State is excellent. And historically, they haven't been that good. And then you look at Cal Poly, which before is kind of like you almost skipped over him on the schedule. Well, Paul Wolf is there, so you have to imagine they're going to be pretty solid. And then, kind of the shocker, Idaho State, looking good against San Diego State, and that is kind of frightening, because you're like you almost chalked up a W at Idaho State, or if they came to your stadium, but now it's looking like they're going to be a challenge as well. So I don't know, coming out of this week, the only teams that look bad, Portland State getting absolutely thumped by Oregon. I mean, that's bad. Anytime you give up 80 points, I don't know what you're thinking in the locker room afterwards. And then Northern Colorado, just looking like Northern Colorado, just not very good, not very competitive there. So I think running through this conference, it's everybody's elite at this point. So, and that's, if you were wanting me to point to a few games, I do have to say Weber State just beating Central Washington with D2 school by 25. That's not the showing they probably wanted to have. They probably wanted that game to be more of a blowout, more of a shellacking, and it just wasn't. And Central Washington, great D2 school, but if you're going to be among the top FCS schools, you got to do better against those lower opponent schools. And I know it's week 1. Week 1's always a little bit weird, right? It always has some funky scores and stuff like that. But 25 points. You got to do better if you want to make a statement that you're an elite program. And then, Montana's win against Butler. I was thinking about this because it cracked me up because, Butler did have a decent year last year, but they're not an they're not an elite football program. If you look at their stadium, it's rather small. I think it seats like 5,000 people. Butler is a basketball school through and through. Mm-hmm. So I think Montana, the Griz did exactly what you would expect against that team. So I don't think it was a statement. I don't think it was like a negative. But if you wanted to get really worried by the Grizzlies, I think they needed to, thump Butler and not have a competitive game with them. On the flip side of that, and you can kind of chime in and tell me that just the excitement about Montana State, they look like the real deal. Anytime you gain more than 600 yards, you got to kind of scratch your head and go, oh my. And then when you have a freshman running back score 3 touchdowns, yeah. You immediately go to your own team schedule and go, yeah, that's an L. Like, I don't know how we're going to slow down them kind of deal. MSU does have a big game against South Dakota State next week, so that's going to be awesome. And that'll really show, like, if Montana State comes out and it's another big offensive extravaganza, you got to be really impressed with that. I mean, look at 638 yards and 407 yards on the ground. Like, that's tough to beat. I don't care who you are. And then Idaho had kind of that balanced attack. Their quarterback, his stats didn't pop out, but it's because he sat in the fourth quarter. But still, they beat Lamar 42-17, and Idaho's legit. I know they had the FBS years where they were kind of a laughing stock of college football, but now back in the Big Sky, they're somebody you got to worry about. And I think that again, if you're kind of in the middle of the pack, you're like, man, I'm not going to get one easy week this year. So also Idaho's running back. This is the stat that stood out to me. He averaged over 10 yards per carry in that Lamar game. And if you got a running back that could do that, you're never going to punt. You're never going to punt the football. So just up and down, it's going to be a very tough league this year.
100% agree. All great points, Brandon. A lot to digest there. I love that you mentioned Idaho State and Cal Poly, how much they've improved. I had Fritz Neighbor of Daily Interlake. He's going to be on this episode as well, a little interview with him. And I said the same thing. There's no cakewalks this year. At this point, it's early. But, I mean, the league looks stacked. You mentioned Idaho. I was just saying to him, I go, Idaho, they could quietly be the second best team in the Big Sky or maybe the most complete offense because what they can do through the air. Montana State, you mentioned their success, unbelievable rushing attack. I'm a football nerd. You could say the X's, O's, this and that. And last year, it was just so fun to watch them always implement a little twist or a little this in their offense. They were so explosive. So you're spot on there. Montana State's going to be a force again. And I know what you mean. You start looking, you're like, are they going to be the team that nobody wants to face once again? And there's so many moving parts, but I do think they're right back at it. And the Idaho Vandals, though, I want to jump back to that. I agree. They look like, to me, a team who the whole entire FCS is going to be on notice because all of a sudden, just one more team out of the Big Sky who can really contend for not just a playoff spot, but they can make a deep run. Where now it's Sac State, Idaho, Montana State. The Griz are always going to be involved in Weber State, both those, and UC Davis, we haven't even mentioned, jumped out, and then all these other squads. So I know you being an Eastern Washington guy, you're like, where the heck are we going to fit in? But I did want to ask you, before we get too far away from it, where do you see Eastern Washington finishing in the Big Sky this year, or just kind of hoping for a middle of the pack, or do you think that they can get hot in conference play and potentially make a run?
The thing with Eastern is a young team. This is week 1, so you really can't. Week 1 against the number 2 team in the nation, so you really can't. You really can't put too much weight on that in terms of they're only gonna score 10 points every game this season. No, North Dakota State, as you know, is probably the most dominant football program in the FCS. So Losing to them 35-10 isn't the worst score in the world. But I think as an Eastern fan, you always expect kind of a shootout. So the 10 points was kind of disconcerting. Now that wasn't because they couldn't move the ball. Couldn't get it in the end zone kind of deal. So I think EWO, they're just going to be learning every week. They're going to be picking up. I expect that offense to get better. But it's a tall order against the Bison. One thing, the coach, Coach Best, after the game, basically said, this is a deceptive statistical performance. North Dakota State had some big plays that really skew those the numbers they had. And again, on the scoreboard, Eastern was moving the ball a little. They again just couldn't punch it in. So I go away with just caution. I'm used to a lot of years where Eastern Washington, they always have a tough non-league schedule, whether it's a FBS team to get that paycheck. They usually schedule one or two FBS teams, or like a fairly top-ranked non-conference foe. And it usually seems, at the very least, if they're not winning, they're competitive. So this does, I think, make me have a little reservations about the season. And I think I still expect a middle of the pack team, just because, like we talked about, everybody else in the Big Sky is impressive. And I think when it comes to this conference, it's kind of a zero-sum game. I'm sure we all remember when Montana was absolutely it in the conference. They were, 2 national championships and dominant. And I think a lot of programs kind of caught up to that model. They were able to kind of work that recruiting game. And I think everybody else is now kind of on a level playing field. Eastern really had the advantage where I think they focused all their recruiting on the offense. So they did not mind getting into a shootout and finding that diamond in the rough quarterback. But now I think, other teams are finding those guys, those dynamic quarterbacks, those dynamic players that could start in an FBS school. No questions asked there. So I just think the conference has across the board caught up to these teams that were traditionally among the top. So I can't believe, Sac State for years was just, again, kind of a write-off. And now, they're highly ranked. They're pulling in 20,000 fans for a game. And I'm just like, man, the landscape has just changed a lot there.
Yeah, and UC Davis, you think the same thing. They're emerging as a potential. They're ranked in the top 25. They're looking like a potential playoff team. So, no, very well said. A lot of that, I can't help but think of a transfer portal era where guys are just looking for a fit where they can go highlight their talents, maybe catch on. So it's helped a lot of these FCS schools. I think at Cal Poly, their quarterback was a 5-star recruit, NFL pedigree, Sam Heward. So you start adding up the map, you're like, whoa, the Big Sky has some real talent, like you said, who could be playing at FBS schools. The Griz transfer quarterback, Sam Bidlack, played Boise State, Oregon State. Their other guy, Clifton McDowell, played a little the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. You start naming all these schools, you're like, there's a lot of talent in the Big Sky. I joked last year, I know the conference with North Dakota State, South Dakota State, they're equally as loaded, but you could almost say the Big Sky is kind of like an SEC of the FCS in the fact they'll have 5-6 teams who are playoff worthy, and they do belong there, where sometimes you get, 5 teams in from a conference, it's a bit of a fluke. It's rare in college football to have that many loaded playoff caliber teams. So no, all great points, Brandon. Definitely. I did want to ask you, just kind of being someone who's followed the league and well familiar with it, do you have any, besides Montana State, we already mentioned, has been stacked this year and they look loaded, but do you have any favorites to win the conference this year or be conference power type of teams?
I think you said Idaho. I don't think we can sleep on Idaho at all. And there's a little residual, Sun Belt Conference, struggling in the FBS where, people really couldn't take them seriously. And then they dropped down. And even when they dropped down at first in the Big Sky, I think they struggled some, but I think they're back at it. They did some renovations of the Kiddie Dome. It's a great facility for FCS. And I just think it's going to be like, old times, maybe the 90s when Idaho was impressive, very impressive kind of deal. So I kind of want to see the Vandals make a run here and bring a lot of excitement to the Palouse there in Moscow. I think that that program has really needed that for years, and I'm kind of glad to see that they're really finding their spot in the FCS.
Couldn't agree more. And I was mentioning to Fritz earlier, I mentioned I had him on the show. The Vandals, they play Sac State at home, the Griz at home, and the Bobcats at home this year. So 3 very tough games, but you're at home in your territory. All of a sudden, you start looking at the Vandals. If they can win 2 of those 3, even that's impressive. If they can beat the Bobcats, all of a sudden, that's a statement win that the whole FCS will be paying attention. So I totally agree. I think they have 2 receivers who are extremely talented. The running back looks like he's ready to break out as a star. He had a good freshman year. Now he's back at it again. And, of course, Giovanni McCoy, the QB, FCS Freshman of the Year last year, Jerry Rice Award. I think he might be quietly, because Tommy Malak gets a lot of credit. A lot of these dudes are up, but he has a chance to be the best quarterback in the conference. As far as a pure passer, especially, one thing really impressed me, McCoy, he gets rid of the ball quick. He's efficient, hard to sack, and all of a sudden you start looking against the Griz, the Bobcats, these kind of teams. You get rid of the ball quick, keep their offense off the field, all of a sudden it gets interesting. So, no, I'm very high on the Vandals as well. I think they're kind of the team right now where you don't know for sure where they're going to be at because they have such a tough conference schedule and a non-conference schedule, but the potential is there to be an FCS top 10 team for sure, and maybe even, top 5 by the end of the year. So a lot of movement early. You said it is week 1. You can't fully judge a team off week 1. But that being said, I'm really high on the Vandals as well. Great stuff, Brandon. If there's anything else you want to throw out there about any other Big Sky schools, I just have 1 or 2 more Eastern Washington questions for you, and then anything else, you feel free.
I do have to ask about the motorized trash can in Bozeman. I saw that video, and I just want to know how the heck that happened.
So many questions. I know. Was that an engineering project? Was that someone just bored in the back? Let's go viral right now. No, I saw that. I posted that on my Twitter. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I think that made it to ESPN even, or maybe it was CBS College Football, but they were posting it on Twitter too. So no. Yeah, the Bobcats with the one and only trash can mobile this year, but they're definitely not the dumpster, the Big Sky. But the irony there, I guess they can get away with it. If you were a 0-10 or a 1-10 team last year, you probably wouldn't want to be rolling out the dumpster. Oh, that's too funny. Well said. Only other thing I was going to ask, or 2 things, I guess. Eastern Washington QB, like you were saying, so tough to tell early on. But what do you know about? I believe his name's Kokoy Vesperis. Kid seems like he does have a lot of talent. Just wanted to get your thoughts on him, and then any other standout players that could step up for Eastern Washington Big Sky fans should be aware of.
Oh, he's extremely talented. The only thing is, kind of young. Eastern usually has no problem reloading with a new quarterback. I swear that's what they focus on. Is they've just had a string of great quarterback after great quarterback, so they're always finding that guy to kind of plug in there. So I'm excited for him. I think he'll be great. But again, it's hard rowing when you're a young player, and just like we said, you have all these ranked teams right in front of you. You got to grow up quick, kind of deal. So
definitely,
he definitely does not worry me at all. I'm excited that Eastern can once again get an athletic, dynamic play caller kind of deal. I think this is something that you need in this conference. I know sometimes some other teams have had a great team, but they just have that traditional QB, and that's hurt them. You kind of need these athletic guys that can hurt you in so many different ways. And then just the wide receiver Chisholm, do not sleep on those EW wide receivers. They always seem to have some high talent guys. Just look at it. You get Cooper Kupp, you get a couple other guys that made it to the NFL, and you're like, how does Eastern keep doing this? This is ridiculous kind of deal. So I think you watch those 2. And then maybe we do need some more production out of the running game. It was not good against North Dakota State, and you got to balance that out. Even if you're a passing team, you still got to keep that defense honest. And the production last week was not good.
Yeah, and that's a tough, like you said, tough test. And then of course, I believe they do have Fresno State on the road this week, and that's also another tough one where you talk about a young quarterback trying to learn. Getting thrown in the fire the first 2 weeks, no doubt about it. And it could be one of those things where, like, you got to take the early struggles for the later good of the greater cause, I guess. I can't think of the word, but point being, those are some tough tests. You play North Dakota State, who's essentially FBS talent-wise. They're up there. And Fresno State, they beat Purdue week 1. So it's going to be tough, but then in the long run, that could set Eastern Washington up to say, hey, we learned from those experiences, roll from it. I like where they're heading as a program, and I do like that you mentioned how they're a little bit of wide receiver I was looking up how many guys from Eastern Washington have made the NFL, and I kept seeing a lot of talent, a lot of wide receivers, kick return. I know Tywan Jones had a good career, so no, they've definitely had some dudes. Of course, Cooper Kupp, you got to mention. I guess we could wrap it up there if you want to say, did you have a chance to cover Cooper Kupp at all? Did you, when he came to EW, did you kind of immediately go, oh, this kid's special, or did it take some time?
Oh, watching the Cooper Kupp game, it was one of the craziest things I ever saw because everybody knew the ball was going to him. The defense knew it. The offense knew it. The fans knew it. And they still couldn't stop him. You could drop it back. He could be triple covered and he was coming down with the ball. I still remember, the game against Oregon. I think we went to that game and I think we sat right next to Cooper Kupp's parents, and he just absolutely destroyed that secondary. And then, coming back, watching a few Eastern games, especially, those Cheney games in the snow, boy, there's something else. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's 10 degrees colder in Cheney than it is in Spokane. But just watching him, you could not slow him down at all. And then it kind of became a farce at one point where it was almost just chuck the ball downfield and he'll come up with it. No worries at all. So that's the kind of talent he kind of brought to that program there. And it made the game feel a little bit different. It didn't feel like the offense was, running this very planned, finally executed balanced offense. It was just like, we're going to play playground ball and throw the ball up to him because he's our best player and we're going to let him show it.
Yeah, just get him the football. No, I had to ask, and it's interesting you say that because you hear about occasionally guys do that at the college level where read defenders, everyone knows. Cooper Kupp, he did that in the league too, so he is just a rare talent. That was him with the Rams. Everyone knew the ball was coming to him that record-breaking season, and they just kept feeding him the football. Just a precise route runner, great at what he does. So I had to ask, we're talking Eastern Washington, one of the Big Sky legends for sure. So, no, great stuff, Brandon. Anything else you want to throw out there? If not, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and looking forward to talking a lot more Big Sky football all season long for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And, I'm talking to my other EW fans and, if Eastern ends up in the middle of the pack, I think we're still going to be excited to see what Montana State is capable of and Idaho. I think that's our secondary teams we want to root on there.
Yeah, no, and both great teams to follow along with this year. I think it's leading up, and it's so early, it's hard to say. Last year, this time, I was thinking the Griz ended up 5-0. Maybe they're on their way to a top Big Sky contender type of year. But Idaho and Montana State right now, if you had to go, what game are you going to pay to go see? Those two teams offensively, so much firepower. It's going to be so fun to watch. NFL type talent on the field. Those two are going to be standout teams in the Big Sky. And even if Idaho maybe doesn't make a run to the Big Sky championship or top of the conference, they're still a team you're going to want to watch because they're loaded offensively. So no, well said, Brandon. Great stuff. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. We'll be talking a lot of Big Sky football this year and going over those teams we just mentioned because they're going to be two of the top contenders for sure across the whole FCS. And I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you. It's always fun to talk Big Sky football.